You're listening to Stand Tall and Own It, the podcast for high-performing female leaders who are ready to make an impact by discovering the safety that comes from understanding their own value and exercising their own authority. I'm your host, Andrea Johnson, and I'm here to tell you it is time to just truly be you, my strong friend. It's time to stand tall and own it. Hey there, welcome to another episode of Stand Tall and Own It. I am your host, Andrea Johnson, and today I have something a little different for you. I actually have a guest. It's been a while since I've had one, and we decided to do a series of some really good interviews based on a few things that I had gotten in feedback from people. I just want to make sure that you all have the kind of tools that I had that laid the groundwork for me to be able to withstand some really hard times and to even lead in times of what many people would think are just times of survival. So today's guest, we're going to kick it all off with a wonderful lady named Deb Ingino. She's a highly sought after executive coach, trainer, and consultant. She is well-versed in business operations and the importance of culture and engagement. Does it sound familiar? We have very similar interests. She brings deep experience in both leadership development and high-performance teamwork, maximizing strengths, play up the strengths, and effective communication in her work. Her skills were honed through over 3 decades of working with and developing leaders and teams that now serve retailers in more than 80 countries. Building on that success, she then became a founding partner with her mentor, the renowned and one and only leadership expert, John C. Maxwell. What a treat. She's a certified Maxwell Disc behavioral analysis consultant, certified coach, speaker, trainer on the Maxwell Leadership Global Team of over 50,000 now. And she serves as a faculty member to that team, adding valuable insight to their members. Guess which area she does that in? DISC. So with a trademark, direct, yet relatable style, she shares really good and practical steps helping business leaders and their teams build and develop and identify really high-performing collaborative teams, positioning them to a competitive advantage. This is why I wanted to bring her on here. I've talked to you guys for 3 years about DISC, and I'm sure by now, whenever I mention DISC, it's like, wah, 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 and it just goes in one ear and out the other. Maybe not. But I wanted to bring Deb in because having a new voice and having somebody that I look to for my information on DISC, I think will give you a whole new perspective. We're going to chat about some really practical things, and I hope that this brings you the information you're looking for to start applying it in your life. I cannot wait for you to meet her. Here is Deb Ingino. Hey, Deb, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. It is such an honor. I was telling you before we started recording, I've listened to you for a long time. You are even just not even in the Maxwell sense or the DISC sense, as a woman who has become a very successful leader. You've been somebody that I've watched, a woman who left corporate and doing your own thing. You've been somebody that I have paid attention to your story. It's been inspirational to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
My pleasure. And I'm very excited about today. Anytime I can spend some time with you and your energy, it's a great day.
Well, we're going to talk about my energy in a minute, but thank you very much. So for those of my audience who may not know anything about the Maxwell Leadership Team and kind of what you do, maybe not have heard of you, can you just give us a brief background and kind of a little bit about your story?
Sure. So my story is probably a typical story. I sort of grew up and was very eager to get into the work world and sort of meet people and start my life. And when I did, I had some incredible opportunity working in corporate, started in the customer services world, which, boy, if you want to learn a lot about people, that is a great place to start.
Isn't it? You see it all.
And yeah, exactly. And ultimately, I had this great opportunity, Andrea, to fly all around the world and create startup teams for our company at that point that now serve customers in more than 80 countries. So with all of that travel and learning new people and new cultures, I needed a method to be able to quickly identify how I can communicate with someone really effectively.
Mm.
And I started to use DISC for that purpose. Now, in Maxwell, very interesting. So after being in corporate for nearly 30 years, 23 years with the same company, really wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was just like one of those dreams I had for a very long time. And when John Maxwell, who I had been reading John's material and watching his VHS tapes back in the day in the 90s.
We're going to date ourselves, aren't we? Yeah.
Exactly. Feel good. When he was starting this team of coaches, speakers, and trainers, I realized that it was just the right time for me
Mm.
to be able to move into training and coaching. So that's what I did.
What I think I heard there is that you were using disc long before Maxwell.
Yes.
So you're an OG disc person, right?
I really am. In fact, it's so interesting. The person I learned disc through, my husband and I's funny story, we were invited to a business workshop by friends of ours. And we had nothing to do that weekend, so we went. And they had different speakers throughout the weekend. One of the speakers was this woman called Florence Littauer.
Mm.
And Florence was teaching about disc using these very ancient terms like choleric and sanguine and phlegmatic and melancholy. And my husband and I were married at that point, maybe about 7 or 8 years. And all those beautiful little things we had fallen in love with about each other were really getting annoying. So when we were sitting there and we were learning about each other at at that workshop, we were elbowing each other like that's it.
Mm.
That's the reason why you look at things so differently than I do. I thought you didn't love me. And he was like, yeah, I thought you were just not respecting me, but I get it now. So now we're married. It'll be 45 years this year. And we still
Oh,
laugh today that once we learned about disc styles, it changed the way we looked at each other and how we could just look to more complete each other than compete with each other. If that
oh,
makes sense.
that's a great way to say it too. I mean, it's like putting on glasses,
Yeah,
right? And I often
exactly.
talk to people about, I grew up overseas. So I grew up in Korea. I grew up speaking different languages, and you can always spot an American tourist when they show up in Seoul because they're just speaking English a little louder than they would have otherwise.
Yeah, yeah,
As if
exactly.
speaking louder is going to make it better. And it's not. You have to actually, right? So you have to speak the
Yes,
language of the person that you're trying to talk to. So what I'm hearing there is that you and your husband figured out the language that you need to speak in order to not compete. And
exactly.
yeah, it's like all of a sudden having on those little headsets they use at the UN where somebody is interpreting in your brain.
Right.
So,
That's
oh, I
right.
love that story. That's a good one. So you really do all the way back to, you actually, did you meet Florence Littauer?
I did. Yeah, Florence was there at that workshop. And you know what's interesting? One of the other speakers that weekend was John Maxwell. And that's how I first intersected with John Maxwell. And here we are. It comes 180 degrees right around and then coming right back around the corner to 360 because now here I am having been a faculty member and the co-creator of the Maxwell Disc program for the John Maxwell team. Like how awesome is that?
It is awesome. And I love stories like this. Like I shared with you that the original couple of years of my podcast were all on interviewing women who had these interesting stories that you might not would have expected. And
Mhm.
that's probably not something going to a little workshop for your, that a business workshop, or if you thought it was for your marriage, you probably had no idea that was going to lead you down a different career path.
Absolutely. It was a business workshop, and just because we were free that weekend, we ended up saying, sure, we'll take those tickets.
Why not? It's free. You can always learn something.
Exactly.
Well, since you are the faculty member that founded the Maxwell DISC program and the report that we get that's a little bit different than a lot of other DISC reports, I wanted to bring you in here because you're the one I learned from. You're the one that I listen to, and I am also a DISC consultant, and I use it with all of my clients. And I
Mhm.
did some DISC episodes early on in the podcast back in 2020. So I'm sure people hear me talk about you need to know your disc and you need to know your core values and you need all these things to layer together. And I allude to it, but I'm starting to think maybe I'm sounding a little bit like Charlie Brown's teacher with my audience because I say the same things over. So I wanted to bring somebody in here who really knows DISC well. And as the founding member who put the program together, you are the person because the Maxwell DISC is different. The report is
It
different
is.
from some of the others. I have people say, and it's okay to use interchangeable words for things, but I have people say, well, my report was just a one pager. How is your report 30? So If you could give us just some basics on disc and then why Maxwell disc stuff is a little bit different.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'll tell you what's so interesting. For those of you who are listening, have you ever found yourself trying to reimagine what you actually do well? Because sometimes the things that we are naturally gifted at, we can tend to take for granted, so much so that we no longer see it as a strength because we're not really working that hard at it.
Yes.
So a very interesting thing when you think about DISC. So DISC is an open source theory. What that means is pretty much a lot of organizations will take it and create their own report. Now, the reason our report is 30 pages is we look at the individual through the lens of leadership and communication. And in fact, let me share with you kind of the key components of the report, and you'll see how this ties into our lives. The first thing is motivation, right? We all face those projects. I know I have one of them that's sitting at my desk that I have to get finished that we're not really motivated for because it's not in our strength zone. So we have to work so much harder at it. So it has a section all about what really motivates us as individuals. Then there's the ideal environment. This is so good because if you plant a seed in the wrong soil, it
Mm,
doesn't grow, it doesn't produce. But yet, if you plant it in the right soil, it produces in a beautiful way. Well, the same is true with people. When we're in our ideal environment, we're kind of in the zone. And
mm,
when we are in that zone, we just not only are we having a great time, we're producing a great result, but other people recognize it. They could see that we're in that zone.
mm.
Then we talk a lot about communication. We have actually, this is so important for my husband and I, communication do's and do nots. Like it
Yes.
maps for each individual person, right, Andrea? Like
Yes.
when communicating with Andrea, do this, but don't do this, right? When communicating with Bob, do this, don't do this. So it's very in depth about communication. But now I got to get to my favorite part. It's about the strengths because we have a page in there that is unique to our report only called Power Disc. And in that Power Disc page, it outlines through 7 different key methods how do we impact people and projects? What are our strengths in that area? And for me, Andrea, that was a game changer
Mm.
because up until I really started to dive into the strengths that go along with my style versus your style versus somebody else's style, I would always compare myself to someone else and said, oh, I should have their strengths.
Yeah.
I should be just like them,
Well, we're
right?
raised that way.
Exactly.
Like, this is the
But
ideal that you're supposed to strive to be. And in any given, like if you're a woman or you're a man or you're in any demographic of society, there's always an ideal that you're striving for.
yes. And what I love about our report, it says, look at you, you've got this great gift and talent in there. And then folks like you, Andrea, as a Maxwell Disc consultant, you can then help people to unearth ways that they can fully leverage those strengths.
Hmm.
And that just makes for a very fulfilling life.
It does. And I'm with you. I love the communication piece, the do and do not. I'll take that page with my clients and I'll say, so this is what you do. You take this piece to your boss that you don't get along with and you reword it and say, it would be great if you would communicate with me this way. I will respond so much better. And I have had so many clients come back to me and say, that was a game changer. Like that's literally the words that they use, just like you did. It just changes the dynamic because it's like telling someone, I actually speak Spanish. I don't speak English.
Mhm.
And then they can say, oh, okay, we can do that for you. Really quick, for some who or may not understand what the DIS and C stand for, give us how
Mhm.
you would tell us how you describe that.
Sure. So think of it, it's a way to map for all of us what is our personality or our behavioral preferences, right?
Hmm.
So D stands for dominant. So these are people that no matter what situation they're in, they want to dominate. For example, if they invite you to lunch, they're going to drive even if it's your car. Like they just need to be in control. I is people that are very inspiring. They like vision. They like to be able to share a message and get people inspired to action. S is people that have that strong S wiring to them. They are gifted with teamwork and they love to have a very friendly, cohesive environment where everybody can serve each other really well. And people that are very C-wired, C stands for compliant. These are folks that are highly analytical. Everything they do is fact-based, and they look at the world through what's right and what's wrong. Now, what's interesting is we're a combination of all four, but it's like, to what intensity are we one versus another?
Yes. And, I told you from the very beginning that I wasn't going to tell you my type. And but here's what I'd love to do is a little exercise is I'm going to put you on the spot
I
and
love it.
and play a little game and just tell you a few things about me as I was growing up and as an adult and
Sure.
see how close you get because I want people to see that DISC is not like a test you take that just kind of tells you you're an A, B, or a C. And, you may have anywhere from 1 to 3. I don't know that anybody truly has a 4. They might, but I could be wrong. I've been proven wrong before. But it's not a defining piece for you. It is an explanation piece for you. So
Yeah.
yeah, let me tell you a couple things, unless you had something to say there.
No, let's do it.
Okay. So growing up, I was a cheerleader, which,
Hmm.
we talked about my energy. I was a cheerleader. I was not a partier, right?
Hmm.
So I didn't get invited to parties. I didn't really go to parties, that kind of thing. I was a Jabberwocky. My mother was the same way, called motor mouth at school. But then I would come
Hmm.
home and I would just like lock myself in my room and read books. I read Les Miserables 3 times, or I'd read Tiger Beat magazine, or I would listen to music for hours. I'd fall asleep to Air Supply, right? Totally
Love
dating
it.
myself. Um, for instance, I got a chalkboard eraser thrown at me in 7th grade by my science teacher. Fortunately, it hit
For
the periodic
talking.
table. Not me, but for talking in class, right?
Of course.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was one of those quick reactions. I was like, whoa.
Hmm.
But I was really shocked when he did that. But, he was like, I told you to stop talking. And I'm like, okay. It's like
I love
painful.
it.
I was told I was too bossy as a kid and that I
Hmm.
needed to tone things down.
Hmm.
Which was really hard because I knew what to do, right? It's like,
Yes.
I'm
Yes. Why
only
would they just get out
bossy.
of your way?
I
Yeah.
know, if you just leave me alone. But as I grew, I also I got some of those really mixed messages, but then as I grew up, I realized I could see the big picture and the details, and I would get
Hmm.
very bogged down. Like sometimes I'd see this vision and then I would get lost in the details of one project and I would never finish.
Yeah.
And yeah, so if I'm a really good editor, I can take your document, I can edit it, I can tell you all the things that needs to happen with it, all the
Yep.
punctuation, I'll find every typo,
Can I
but
make can I make another observation? Oh, go ahead.
I can't find them in mine,
Oh, I
right?
love it.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, even when you first came on camera today, right? So also observationally, right behind you, I'm going to assume that it's not a green screen.
Oh no, this is my basement.
Exactly. So right behind you, so very interesting, the way you have the decor laid out, it's very organized, but it's got some creativity to it.
And for those of you who are not watching this on YouTube, you need to pop over to YouTube, but if you've seen any of my photos at my desk, she's right. I've got succulents on the back wall. None of them are real.
Yep. Yep.
I can't, I can't keep them alive.
Because you'll kill
Um,
them. Exactly.
yes,
Yes.
I killed them. I even killed succulents. Um, but it's a white wall, which
Yep.
means I get to wear whatever color I want. And
Exactly.
yet it's organic, right? Because it's a lot of plant-based stuff. There's, of course, my pineapples and a little
Yep.
bit of flamingo stuff back there. But yeah,
And
so
what's your YouTube channel so people can go to it?
oh, it's just theintentionaloptimist.com. And on every
Okay, great.
single, or it's The Intentional Optimist on YouTube. And on every single podcast, like it's in my show notes. And it's like, so, and if you want all the fun hand motions and
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Well,
yes,
what's interesting is, so observationally, right? So it's what behaviors you witness in people. It's also the environment that you witness them in.
mm,
The other observation is that you're wearing a very bright color.
it's bright
So,
orange for those of you who are not,
yep.
and
So
hot
for
pink.
example, for example, with some of the behaviors that you shared, that shows a lot of eye wiring. So it shows a lot of a person who's very comfortable being out front, but I don't need to be out front. But if I'm out front, it's okay,
But
right?
if
As
I'm
long
out
as I'm
front, I might as well
choosing.
stand out.
Exactly. As long as I'm choosing it and it's not choosing me, it sounds
Hmm.
like. being a little bossy, that's a very D-wired characteristic, and wanted to have control. And boy, I'm 5 years old, but why can't they let me run the house? I know what to do anyway,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, but also you've got that structure and that clean background. So that also lends itself to a little bit of C wiring as well. So it could just be that your details are very high, especially since you said that you're good at editing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's a very strong C wiring capability.
Mm-hmm. You nailed it. But
Okay.
it's ICD.
CD. Yep.
Yes.
You got it.
So in the Maxwell report, we have for each type, we have a title or a name that kind of gives us an
Yeah.
understanding of what that personality might look like. Do you know what the ICD is?
I'm trying to remember. It's not assessor because that's the IC. I want to say leader.
It's the leader.
Yep.
And so my I, for in the Maxwell report, it's you have on a scale of like 8 in one direction, 8 in the other direction. I am
Yep.
nearly at an 8 on the I. And I
Yes.
am, my C and my D are right around like a midway above, like a 3 or 4. But depending on my situation, the C will just take over. So I
Yes.
have a dear mentor and friend, Monique Minnick, who brought me into Maxwell and introduced me. She's
Oh my
executive.
gosh, I love Monique.
Yes. Okay. Monique is my mentor, and
Love it.
she is a DI, and she
Yes.
has learned because we just did a Live to Lead conference here in Charlottesville, and together, and she has learned that when she talks to me about anything like that, she has to talk to my C,
Yes,
right? Because
exactly.
I need all those details. But
Yep.
I tell you what, Deb, it just and with my clients too, my S is like at a -5.
Hmm.
So I'm not
Yeah.
just a
Yes.
leader, I'm like at a -5 team member. And so I joke with my clients, I say I'm the definition of a non-team player, right? I am the team leader.
I
And
love it.
yeah, and so a lot of times I felt schizophrenic, I
Yes.
felt like why do I really want to be with people all day long and then I just can't get away from them fast enough, to come
Yeah.
home. And why is it that I'm a cheerleader and I can do that and I can perform, but I don't really need to be at a party? I never could understand those things about myself until I looked at my report and I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. That's how I'm
Yes.
wired."
Yeah, you're a classic definition of an ambivert. So
Yes.
someone who's not an introvert, not an extrovert, that you move in and out of both of those segments as long as you control it.
Yes. As long as I control it.
Yeah. You know what's
And
very interesting? I just want to share really
yes.
quickly. What I love about that ICD style is you've got this like just incredible blend of creativity
Mm.
and being in the spotlight and being very comfortable being out front, hence the reason you have a podcast,
Mhm.
and being able to control the detail and control the big picture. And when you're ready to dive into those details, you will have things pop out at you that are wrong, just
Mhm.
like as if it's popcorn popping out of the popper.
It does. Yes. And I used to think that it was really weird for me to see the big picture and to see the forest and the trees. It's
Yep.
like, look at that beautiful forest. Oh my goodness, there's an aspen in there, right? I mean, I thought it just made me crazy. But what I realized is when you go back to talking about the power disc, this is one of my superpowers. This is one of my
Right.
strengths. I do really good with strategic calls, even if it's just a one off. I had one lady. Literally, she said, I only want like two. Would you just read these things for me and then just meet with me for about 2 hours and then just like talk strategically through it? And I was able
Yeah.
to do that in a way that was so helpful for her because I can do that big picture, small picture really fast.
Yes.
So I actually offered that kind of a meeting with my clients because sometimes that's all somebody really needs is that
Right.
strategic meeting. And I took it all for granted. But I also found that being in corporate, one of the reasons it didn't work is because as soon as the values or the mission of whatever team I'm on, because I can be on a team, right? A
Mm-hmm.
classic I will tell you, yeah, I can lead or not, as long as I trust you. If I think you're a good leader, I'm following. And I used to say that in interviews. And I had no idea I was describing my I style.
I love it.
Yeah. But as soon as I don't align with that anymore, it's like I'm out quietly or not, but I'm out.
And you know what's interesting? In the workplace, this can also be very much misread. So
Yes.
in careers, right, where someone is very bold and assertive and sees the big picture and wants to be in control. And yet, you know, in the organization, they're looking at that like, well, that's not the role we hired you for,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
Or why do
instead
you
of
want it to be
tapping,
bigger? Or, you know, yeah.
right. So instead of tapping into the strengths of the individual, they're trying to minimize the strengths of the individual. And
Hmm.
that makes both the employer and the employee very unhappy.
Oh,
We help
extremely.
people to do the opposite. We
Right.
really help people to understand that what their real strengths are. And then, you know, working with somebody like you, Andrea, you help them figure out how to use them.
Yeah. I mean, I was one of those people that was told, can you just do the job we hired you for? If you do
Yeah,
that well, maybe we'll
exactly.
promote you. And I'm like, I know, but I don't do this part well. I could do that part well. And they don't
Right,
want to
right.
hear that, you know? And I would then, as a hiring manager, look at people and say, this is a launch pad job for you. This is not a landing pad. And some people would
Yes.
look at me like I had four heads. Now,
Yep.
one woman actually used me as a reference because I didn't hire her because she was really better suited for HR. And I told her from the beginning, I
Oh,
said,
that's
I'm gonna hire
great.
you. Yeah. And she said, well, why are you interviewing me? I said, because I need to know you. You have this amazing resume.
I love
Like,
that.
this
Well,
is
you know what's
crazy.
so fun too? It's like, think about it. It's something we use. This is what I love about Maxwell Desk. We use it professionally,
Mm. Hmm.
use it in our relationships. I mean, even relationships with our kids. I'll give you a great example. Our daughter is CNS wired. She's a precisionist.
Mm.
So
My
she
husband
was
is. Hmm.
okay, had to be on time all the time. Her room was neat, organized. Like her clothes were in color order. Like all the reds are together, all the blues are together, right?
Well, how would you know
Anyway,
what's in your
and
closet if you don't do that?
exactly. Well, I'm telling you, I'm surprised she didn't have like the Dewey Decimal System for her clothes closet. Okay. But what was funny is growing up, even as a kid, when she was younger, and you know, we'd be getting ready, like she was taking some lessons on the weekend, and she would say, Mom, I, what time do we have to be there? I say, well, we have to be there at 8 o'clock this morning. She would say to me, well, how long does it take to get there? "Mm, 30 minutes. Well, Mom, how long is it going to take you for you to get ready? "Mm, 20 minutes." She would say to me, okay, we have to leave at such and such time. Like she was very precise.
Mm.
And I kind of started to feel like, well, who's the parent and who's the child here?
Hmm.
You
Mm.
know, it just
Hmm.
felt a little awkward when I really learned about, you know, disc styles, and I understood that she's wired for that perfection, for the detail,
Hmm.
for organization, for structure, right? I was like, well, I might as well use this to my advantage. So when we had our lessons on Saturday, I would say, well, I will be on time as long as you can go make my bed. I will be, I'm going to need you to unload the dishwasher for dad and I, so that this way we can make sure that I will be out of the house on time. Like, hey, she loved doing tasks anyway, and she was great at it. She did it really well. I might as well use it, right?
Oh, that's great. Well, I do want to share too that my son is 15 and we did the student because the reports we have how many reports are there total? I've
Oh
lost
gosh,
count.
7 different types. Yeah.
7 different types. There's communication, there's the standard, there's the student, which is for kids like ages 10 through 14, maybe.
Yeah.
Is that
Yep.
right? And
Exactly.
then there's a college and career. And so we did the student one and he showed up as a D, which I thought that's really weird. Because he's like the kid that can spend like hours just looking at Lego.
Hmm.
But we just did this college and career, and he is just me on a different axis.
Mix
Is
up.
this
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
mix up, and he's the mediator. So it's either a CID or a
Yes.
CDI.
Oh,
Um,
I love it.
Yes, and which makes complete sense because he's the kid who I'm a yeller. I was a cheerleader. I say things
Hmm.
loud, and
Sure.
I had to learn. And he's adopted, so he doesn't take after me or my husband.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I had to learn that even just saying something sternly to him means that I'm yelling. And I can
Yes.
watch that. I mean, C's do not want any kind of conflict in their environment, right? And
Right.
S's either. But you can just literally watch the shield come down over his face. I'm like, oh,
Yes.
I triggered it again, doggone it. And so
Yes.
when we look at our kids, it helps us figure those things out. But the
That's
other
right.
piece that I talk about is core values. And
Mhm.
the adult standard and the communications, I don't think they mention the value pieces. But in
Hmm.
the college and career, they do talk about
Yes,
that,
yes, that's right.
which which is really good because at least gets young people started out looking at, well, what am I going to, what am I going to live for? And what, it's not just how I'm wired communication wise, but how I'm wired. I think in the regular disc, it talks about that's your motivation. That's really what your core values are, is your motivation. So I'm really excited to see how those things work together. And I think we've done a good job sharing with people kind of how they can use disc. Um,
Yeah.
but
Can I tell them that they need to know though how they can, really have an opportunity to get their own report
oh,
because
sure,
knowledge is
of
power.
course, yes.
So I
Um,
think in your website, when they go to the intentionaloptimist.com forward
correct,
slash disc, right?
correct,
So the intentionaloptimist.com forward slash DISC.
correct.
Go ahead and check it out for yourself, folks. I'll tell you, it revolutionized. First of all, it helped me for Thanksgiving dinner with family coming over that we
Oh
only
my
see once
gosh.
a year. That was tough to work with. And just in business, in life in general, when we know ourselves, it is such an empowering feeling. And when
Mm.
we're able to recognize other people's styles and approach them in a way that makes conversation and connection a lot easier and reduce the drama, boy, that's something our world needs now more than ever before.
Absolutely reducing the drama. And there are pieces in the report. And if you go to my website, you can see there's three basic levels that you can just do the report. Because some people, maybe you're a C wired, that just can read that report and there's like 5 or 6 pages at the very end that help you map out your own personal growth and development plan. And some people can just do that report and that is enough for them and they can apply it. Some
Yes.
people need a little more. And so I do individual debriefs. And some people need, Andrea, I need you to not just the debrief, but let's actually work through some of that personal growth plan. So
Right.
there's different levels there. And you can always contact me. But one piece that I pull out and I use all the time with people I hand it out is this like one page. I think it's page 8 of the report. And it's what I call the cheat sheet or the crosswalk.
Yes, I love that page.
I literally took that to a local business who was having trouble. And I said, just put this up in your lunchroom. And I came back the next time and they said, 10 minutes. That's all it took. And now we kind of have an idea of how we can communicate and why this person doesn't need to be on the same shift as that person, or we now understand why she's really bossy or why she does things this way. And it really makes a difference. So I also have that free resource that y'all have heard, and it's in all of my show notes, the Ultimate Disc Cheat Sheet, that's very easy for you to get. And it has in there like information on your kids, how you start spotting things early on, like me wanting to be with people all day and then being quiet in the afternoon.
Mhm.
But really quick before we go, Deb, standing tall and owning who you are is not always easy. And you have shared some really good personal examples of how you've used DISC and it's changed you. What would you say is the biggest area that DISC has allowed you to actually kind of stand tall and just be Deb?
Yeah, great question. Boy, there's so many pieces to it. First of all, I think understanding myself, I'm wired very differently than my six other siblings and my two parents. So, kind of growing up, I felt like, what was I adopted? I'm not sure because we're just very different, right? So that piece alone was like a revelation to me. But
Mm,
I'll tell you the other thing that was very important was that I tended to not see my strengths as strengths
hmm.
because when something is something we're naturally gifted in, we just roll forward with it and we minimize it. People say, wow, thanks for doing that. And our response is, oh, it was nothing. Because to us, it's in our strength zone. But
Yeah.
when you see in a report in black and white what your real strengths are, and trust me, we all have them, okay?
Yes.
When we see them, and now we start to connect the dots to what we've done in our past, but more importantly, what can we do in our future? Boy, that was just that revolutionized how I saw my potential.
And was that when you kind of, especially when Maxwell decided to develop the coaching certification and the team and stuff, is that when you decided to take those strengths and apply them in a way that was a little different than you had been?
Yes, exactly. That was the timing.
Yeah. So is there any one client story that maybe is the biggest turnaround that you've seen with someone using DISC?
Yeah, very interesting story. And this has actually happened to me a couple of times. I tended to get called in for corporate clients that were owned by multiple owners, right?
Oh,
So
that's hard.
co-owned
Yes.
situation,
Yes.
harder than a marriage, believe it or not. And in a couple of situations, what happened was it was at the point where they were thinking of breaking up the business. It was that
Mm.
bad.
Mm.
And coming in and helping them to, first of all, have them each take their Maxwell Disc report, have them understand how to communicate with each other, but also how to really look at the strengths, again, to complement each other instead of compare themselves to each other.
Mm.
That changed everything for those business partners.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. I've seen people just completely change the way they look at each other and the way they communicate with each other, and it's extremely inspiring, and to hear that you've actually had the situation where it's saved businesses, and I'm sure it has saved marriages, and I congratulations on your nearly 45 years. We're coming up on 29 in a couple of months ourselves.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But as we close out, I'd love to know if you could share a little bit about maybe your style, what your actual style is, because I'm not as good as you, and I'm not going to even try to guess, because I know that you're teaching some a little bit right now too, so that kind of takes over how we see ourselves. But share us your style, and then maybe that journey of understanding how different you were from your siblings, and where that how that has brought you a lot of
Yeah. So growing up, I grew up in the Bronx in New York City
Mhm.
in a two-bedroom apartment, 7 kids, two parents, 2 bedrooms, one
Oh,
bathroom. So
wow.
we had to learn at a very early age how to kind of navigate around each other. So I think part of my excitement, what I learned about Maxwell Disc was being able to like see, oh, that's why this would happen or that would happen. Like it just helped to connect the dots.
Mm,
I think the other piece that was really important for me as a milestone was that when I had this entrepreneurial bug while I was in corporate and I really wanted to start my own business, I didn't have the context for how could I take my experience in the optical industry in operations that had
mm,
nothing to do with wanting to be a coach, speaker, a trainer. How could I take that experience, Bridget, right into this entrepreneurial journey? And what the Maxwell Disc report has done for me personally is it's allowed me to see my strengths through a completely different lens, pardon the pun,
mhm,
because I was able to see how I could leverage it into being what I wanted to become.
mhm,
So I think for many of us, if we find ourselves kind of in that rut and routine and we're thinking, no, it's too late. I can't change careers now, or I can't start a business now, or I can't
mhm.
start a family now. Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can. Oh, I love that. And if you're listening and you are interested in hearing more from Deb, you can do that if you're in the Maxwell, a member of the Maxwell leadership team. And it, contact me, DM me, or email me at Andrea at theintentionaloptimist.com. I will definitely respond back because it has changed my life as well. So thank you so much. This has been at least as good as I hoped it would be. And I am excited to continue to learn from you, Deb. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Andrea.